Good
Hello,
morning.
friends. Welcome to the Story Within podcast. Today we have with us my resident editor, Vision to Purpose. She's amazing, but we'll get to her amazing self in just a second. Hello, Melanie. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning.
On this episode 10, we're going to talk about the importance of self editing for self-publishers. But I have Melanie on the show because as a professional editor, she can share a lot of tips and tricks to guide us as we work our manuscript, and then how to prepare to send it to her, or a professional editor, I should say, to get the process started. Because I do firmly believe that all authors should have some sort of editor, professional editor, even a friend who can look at your manuscript that is, has that gift. And actually, that's kind of how it started with Melanie. She just had this gift for, looking at anything that I write. And I'm thinking I'm doing a great job. I mean, I do have a PhD and all, right? Yeah, I quickly was reminded that I don't have a PhD in English. I don't have a PhD in grammar. And it took me back to my my youth, in my early 20s, I should say, working at a law firm and doing administrative legal work. And I learned the lesson of when you type something up, your brain sees what it wants to see. So you skip over things when you're proofing. And at that time, I was actually at the American Center for Law and Justice. I worked for Jay Sekulow and others. You have probably seen him on TV. I was blessed to have had that opportunity. But the more amazing part was I got to work on several Supreme Court files. And those cases, before you can send anything to the Supreme Court, you have to make sure they are, error-free. And I learned quickly that as my boss was sending me materials to look at, that I couldn't make mistakes. Melanie will probably look at me like, really, you? But it's true.
Well, it's different when you're looking at somebody else's work versus your own, because like you said, you're reading what you thought you wrote. And so your brain will fill in a lot of gaps. So it's always a good idea to have a second set of eyes on it.
Yes. And in that case, I obviously was not an attorney. I didn't write the Supreme Court, documents that went up. I just reviewed the ones written by Jay and other attorneys in the office. So yes, I could catch things because I didn't write it. Anyway, all right. So yes, book editors are so important. I know we're going to talk about self-editing, but I have to get this out. They're important because they're crucial partners. And the reason I bring that up is, they have the knowledge, the talent, the skills, those revision skills to really take your manuscript from that rough draft, that, okay, it's a good product, to potentially that bestseller, because again, like Melanie was saying, she's going to catch things, an editor is going to catch things that you're not. And that leads me to another quick thing. And, Melanie, jump in if I'm getting any of this wrong, because I know this is your area of expertise, but there's also different types of editors.
Yes.
There's your developmental editor, there's your editorial assessor, there's your copy editor, and there's a proofreader. And I'll tell you, for me, Melanie has been that at times the developmental, at times she's been the copywriter, at times or copy editor, and at times she's just been the proofreader. It just depends on the amount of work truly that I've put in, up front, and then, the back and forth. We may start off and she may do some developmental editing, but by the end, it's just proofreading. Did I catch that last error? Did we miss anything? So it also can be in stages.
Yeah.
So, and let me bring that up.
I wanted to bring up just a quick. So I actually wrote a blog this week. What does a book editor do? And that'll be posted later today. But I wanted to kind of make a distinction between an editor and a good editor, because a good editor is not. You have to be delicate, because a writer's work is sort of like one of their children. They put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. but you have to like take that into consideration, but you also have to be able to tell them this needs work. You cannot shy away
Right.
from telling them, hey, this is kind of rough around the edges. You've got to be able to say it in a way where they don't get discouraged and they still want to work through it. But also you can't just you can't be afraid of people's feelings and not do the best job possible. Because if you want to put something out that you're proud of having your name on, and that also the author is proud of having their name on,
Right.
you have to be able to, I don't want to say tough love because it's not mean spirited in any way, but it's just, you have to be able to be completely honest with something as delicate as somebody's work of art, you know, their writing. So between an editor that just does like, oh, spelling and whatever, and doesn't really care about the content, to an editor who has a great grasp on good writing and what readers want to read. So there's you know, as with anything, there's a scale of quality, and so you want to make sure that you get an editor that's
Yes.
you know, on that higher end.
Exactly. Going back to what Melanie said about, you know, every author is different, and some have thicker skin, we'll just say, than others. So Melanie knows me so well. She knows that I'm a sensitive soul. So she would, before she would send me, you know, my edits, she would say, now, Janine, red means love.
Yeah, because in the Bible, Jesus's words are in red. So I would say, Jean, just remember, red means love. So.
Right. So that really meant a lot to me, because that really set, you know, my expectations. Okay, she's coming at me, but she's doing it from a position of, you know, we're friends. So love, obviously, but also she wants to set me up for success too. She knows, she's watched me, she's heard me, she's seen my tears. You know, when you're putting things, you know, out there, one, there's so many fears you already have as an author. You know, how's your book going to be perceived? Did I cover everything in the book? Are there holes? I mean, you have all of these things going on in your head. So when you give that manuscript, as she said, your baby, you know, over to someone to review, sometimes, you know, the stress is a bit high. You know, I've learned now, we've done several together, but and
wouldn't you rather get the objective criticism and corrections from me, one person that you trust, versus just sending it out into the world and everybody, you know, giving you that feedback, you know, on your like rougher draft? You know, wouldn't you rather just have it from one trusted professional versus, you know, the public? So that's, you just got to get that in your mind, like, okay, this might be a little painful, but it's worth it in the end.
Yes, because that's a good point. You know, once you get it out there, you're a self-published author. So you're going to use platforms, you know, where you post your book, you do all the work yourself to get it published. And then you rely on reviews. And not everybody has the same personality. You know, we're all unique, right? So some people will forgive an error here and there. Other readers will not, and they will let you know it. So I agree 100% with Melanie. I would rather have her tell me, Janine, I don't know what you were thinking here, but try this, or you might want to consider that. I even had her one time say, I totally disagree with this. It was a scripture I was using, and the way I was using it, I wasn't conveying it properly. And she's like, the way you have this, girl, no, this is not working.
Yeah. And that was an instance of your brain was like, your words, you were perceiving it totally different than what I was reading it just blank. And you were like, oh, I totally see what you mean in that situation. That's not what I intended. And so having somebody that's not the author go through and say, this is what I read, and based off the rest of your book, this doesn't fit. I don't think you meant what it is coming out as. And so having an editor that's not just looking for spelling errors, but really taking in the whole work. That's, you know, that's invaluable.
Yes, agreed. And I would say, you know, getting to know your editor, I was fortunate that, you know, Melanie and I worked together. So we already knew each other, and she knew, you know, my heart. She knows my heart, where I'm going with the business, where I'm trying to go with my books. and, trying to glorify God in the end. That's the whole point of writing the types of books that I write. You have to get to know your editor so that when they are editing your book, you don't lose your voice,
Right.
you still want changes and you want to make it better, but you don't want to lose yourself. That is still your creative piece.
Right.
Then that's
you don't want your book in my voice as your editor.
Exactly. All right. So we talked enough about, why it's good to have a professional editor, and I'll keep beating the drum on that because I do think it's important. But let's talk about self-editing. So there's a couple things. Here's a quote that I read somewhere else, and doggone, I can't remember where I saw it, but I'm sharing it anyway. It is no sign of weakness or defeat that your manuscript ends up in need of major surgery. Yes, I totally agree. This is common in all writing and among the best writers. That's E.B. White. And you want to know who one of those best writers is? In 1956, Hemingway did an interview, and the interviewer asked him, how often do you edit your books? What do you, what is your process, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And he said, well, it depends. For example, in the book, Farewell to Arms, he rewrote the very last page 39 times. And the interviewer was kind of stunned. I mean, this is Hemingway, right? 39 times, the one page, the last page of this book. So the interviewer, perplexed, was like, was there like a technical problem? Was something not meshing? And Hemingway said, well, yeah, the problem was I couldn't get the words right. So I kind of chuckled because as authors, that's exactly the process. When we look, sometimes you look and you look and you look and you edit and you edit and you edit. Even with an editor, you still continue to edit.
Yeah.
And you don't stop until you're happy, to be honest, and I'll tell you, being a self-published author, sometimes you even publish the book. I've pulled my book, Broken to Beautiful, 2 times, 3 times, because I've caught something and it just didn't sit right. And I've gone back in and then reposted it, which is the beauty of self-publishing. You can repost within a day. But the point is, everybody, even the best authors, edit. They self-edit. So it's not anything to be ashamed of. You can, take that rough draft, do a lot of different things before you send it on to anybody else to review. So no shame in that. It's part of the process. It's part of the process. I mean, that even started in school, remember? Write your first draft,
Right.
Right.
Which is so funny because I always hated writing multiple drafts because I was one of those that was like one and done. And what I went through a writing class where I think we had 4 separate drafts. And I was like, I wrote it perfect the first time. What do you, I had like, for me as an editor, you would think like I have no problem with different with different drafts. But that was one thing I really struggled with. I was like, I did it how I wanted it the first time. But I think that's because I have such an eye for it that I don't write it until it's like exactly how I want it, But
yeah, you do have a gift. I don't know how you do that. I'm not that way.
Well, I also worked as an editor in a news station. So I did do this for a lot of, for some years, editing newsprint and stuff that went on the radio, stuff that went on TV. So I've kind of always been really particular about words.
True. And folks, she does cringe when I put these fancy, little banners up and they have a typo. She's like, Janine.
Do you see my eyes? I go to it and I'm like, is it written right?
I just laugh.
I'm always correcting. I'm silently correcting your grammar. I'm one of those people.
I know. I just, All right. So self-publishing. Well, yes, we are self-publishing. Self-editing for self-publishers. So what can we do before sending our manuscript to that professional editor? Well, things that I do: tighten sentences, rewrite. I can't speak today anymore. Rewrite weak sentences, cut unnecessary words, change passive to active voice, Remove intensifiers. I have a hard time with that one. But I got Melanie, so. And then you can also show instead of tell and use more descriptive words. So I'm still working on the show instead of tell because I want to tell everything. As you can tell, I'm a talker and I want to, you know, tell you the whole thing. But that's not good for an author. You want
you have a history in precise writing.
Right.
Yeah. Technical writing in like academic technical writing. And so Janine and I have had this conversation where, and I have a history in newsprint. So in those two fields, you have to be very to the point and nothing flowery and nothing extra. And so I remember when we were going through one of your books, it was like, okay, give me more emotion in here. Give me more feeling, because you fall back on your technical writing, which is like really good. Your technical writing is excellent. I mean, your other writing is excellent as well. But when I'm being real nitpicky, I'm like, Janine, this is too technical, too to the point, make it more feeling,
Right. No, she's absolutely right. I remember being that creative, descriptive person, but, after doing technical writing and academic scholarly writing for, so many years, they kind of beat that out of you.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get it back. At some point, I am going to write that fiction book. We'll just see how that goes.
I know. It's going to be so good.
I'm looking forward to it. But anyway, so how do you tighten sentences? What do I mean by that? What do you think, Melanie?
Tightening sentences. Do you mean like when you have, there's a really funny word for it. And being an editor, I actually really hate like all the grammatical terms, but it's like like when your sentences, like when you have them kind of mixed around, is that what you're talking about?
Well, So I throw you on the spot because you always are tightening my sentences. I'm very wordy, and you're like, you don't need this. Just here, let's break these into 2 sentences. Yeah. Or, you're being redundant. You don't really even need this. So get rid of that, that kind of stuff. Expletives, adding that it, with a be verb, or a there with a be verb. So I'll give you an example. So there are many dog breeds competing across the country. Okay, do I need no, many dog breeds compete across the country. Right. I don't need the extra, there or it and a be verb.
I think you meant by like tightening sentences, you want them not to be so clunky. So they're not clunky.
Cleaning them up.
And another thing that I look for when I'm reading is, does the paragraph have a nice flow? You don't want a whole bunch of sentences that are one, just like, many dog breeds compete across the country. Holding hands when crossing the street is important. Da 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 da. When they're all just the same length, you want a very length, unless you are trying to make a point where you can say, when you can be a little bit repetitive, like, I had an example in the article that I wrote earlier, and of course I can't think of it right now on the spot. But when you're repetitive, like, I felt the icy hand on my shoulder. I looked around, and you're kind of like being repetitive to like paint a picture, but most of the time you want to it can get very clunky and just boring to read the same kind of length sentence and the same wording pattern over and over.
Or every sentence starts the same. It was a rainy day. It started off this way. It was, how many times are you going to use it? She's actually caught me on that. But, tightening it up. That it with a be verb, it is important to hold hands when crossing the street. I heard you say that. Holding hands when crossing the street is important. I mean, tighten it, Or
I would even reword that. Holding hands is important when crossing the street.
Yes, that's my expert editor. Yes. And then cut unnecessary words. Oh my gosh. So when I was working on my dissertation in the doctoral program many, many moons ago, I had a mentor, a gentleman who had been, at that point, he had let's see, he graduated probably 20 years before me. He was an older gentleman, And he had already written probably 40 journal articles that were published. He was the head of the dissertation program at a particular popular school. So my point, this guy was amazing is the whole point. But he would catch me on words. He's like, why are you using that word? It's not needed. And one of those words was the word that. If that is in your sentence, read the sentence with the word in it. If it's needed, leave it in there. But if you now read the sentence, take that word out, the word that. And if it still reads okay, it didn't change the meaning, it's not needed. Take it out. Right. And so that's a huge one for me. I feel like this expert editor when I go through my stuff and I'm like, oh, that it's not needed. You know, I'm so proud of myself like a child. I really am. I love that one. But there's lots of others. Like that's a big one for me. I can't think of any others at the moment, but
well, and I know you're going to talk about Grammarly in a little bit, but yes. Grammarly is an excellent tool because it will catch those types of things. It'll catch passive voice, which I think we are going to talk about, and it'll take out that you know, out of a lot of sentences, or it'll highlight it and it'll say, is this necessary in this sentence? Or try rewording it this way. So Grammarly can do a lot, but it is a machine and it's not infallible and it does not take the place of a human being.
True. Very true. And yes, we are going to get to that. So then I also look at removing intensifiers. So I call them, in my opinion, fluff words or unnecessary words. So really, very, quite, extremely, severely. And I was also told by another popular author that publishing houses frown on words that end in ly. So if they see a manuscript with a lot of ly words in them, they will pass a lot of times on the book. So that was interesting to me because I'm always thinking that to emphasize something, I gotta say really.
But for example, if you were to say, oh, it was really big, you could instead say it was enormous. So choose a better word that implies the intensifier without using the intensifier, and that goes back to being less wordy.
Yes, absolutely. And then as you talked about passive and active voice, Grammarly does a great job with that. I do struggle with that one. I'm not sure why. I guess it's just my personality. I always want to keep things more passive instead of active and to the point, which is ironic because with that technical writing, I am more active. I use more active voice because you have to. Bottom line up front, they say the bluff, you know.
Well, passive voice actually, it avoids it avoids placing responsibility, or it avoids placing blame. For example, if you were to say, the milk was left out of the fridge, instead you could say, I left the milk out of the fridge, you know, or who. Exactly. Passive voice leaves out who, or you could say, well, it's been said that, you know, this or that. Well, who said it? You know, it avoids, it helps you avoid having to place credibility. And so avoiding passive voice lends credibility to your writing, and it lends clarity too.
Yes. And again, I think that goes back to my personality because I'm very much the mediator, counselor. I don't place blame. I talk around and hope somebody gets that I'm really talking about you, person. You know, you did it, you know, and
Melanie instant replays all of our conversations we've ever had.
Uh-oh. I just gave my tell. No,
I know.
No, but that's my personality. So I want everybody to feel good. I don't believe in everybody should get award if they didn't earn it, though. That's a whole different side of my personality.
Yes, we'll have a podcast about participation trophies.
Right. That's a whole nother thing. Yeah. All right. And then showing instead of telling, another thing I am working on as a writer. Sometimes it's just hard, but again, it's word choice.
Let me tell, and then you show.
Right.
Let me tell. Okay. So he was cold. How would you show that?
So he shivered and pulled his coat more tightly around him. Now you can picture it. Now you picture the scene, right?
What about he was a tall man?
He ducked as he entered the room. Now you see this tall guy who's got to bend down to go under.
Right. Immediately, I'm like, he's got to be at least like 6'6" or something, because how tall are door? You know, it makes you start thinking.
Right. So, and that really makes your writing a lot more interesting. You know. Yes, you can tell somebody, but you know, if you're watching a movie, here's a perfect example. You're watching a movie that somebody in the room has already seen. How many times do you hear, hey, and this is going to happen next, and they tell you before. So then when the scene does arrive, you're already looking because you've been told what was going to happen. It's kind of a little bit different, but kind of the same premise, because you're not envisioning it for yourself as it unfolds now. Now you're envisioning what they saw. So as a writer, you want your readers to envision, you're bringing them into this world with you, this story, and you want them to form their own thoughts on what they're reading, using their creative thoughts, you know.
I have a good example of this. This is actually, this is in the article that I wrote this week. But this is an excerpt from a letter that I wrote to an author. So this is what I wrote to her, because I also, as an editor, I will write, like if you're looking for directional advice, I will type up an entire thing saying, hey, this is what it needs. Maybe you could go in this direction, try doing this, whatever. And I'll write up a whole thing on things that you can do to make your book better. But I wrote this to her. You mentioned quite a few times that you stuffed your feelings, were a bad beep, or put on your armor. I think you may better serve your book if you use those catchphrases more sparingly. It was very repetitive in the initial work that I had read. So I said, try adding in some more descriptive or emotional passages like, and this was I was just spitballing, and this is my example. Once again, I swallowed my pride, ordered my tears back into their ducts, straightened my spine, gritted my teeth, and did what I had to do. There wasn't time for my feelings. Compared to what my husband was going through, I believed that I didn't have the right to complain about my problems. Acknowledging my grief would take away from the emotional support that he needed. I couldn't take that from him. I couldn't afford to let him down. Calluses were building on my heart that, yes, protected me during wartime, but prevented me from letting him back in when he came back home. That's the funny thing about feelings. You can't just turn them on and off when you want to. You either acknowledge them and maintain a healthy relationship with them, or you shut them off and cut off access to them at all. So doesn't that evoke more emotion than I stuffed my feelings again?
Yes. I felt like I was that woman. You know, I felt like I was, it helped me recall a situation, maybe not, you know, a husband with wartime experiences, but it took me to a place where I was experiencing a time when I stuffed my feelings and what it felt like. So huge difference.
Yeah, all the things that go through your mind. Yeah.
And you probably gave her another 50 words for her.
Right. Her book is like 20 chapters longer now.
Right.
No.
Yeah, no, perfect example. Perfect example. Yeah, see, I told you guys, Melanie has a gift. Just saying. All right. And then, and it kind of, you know, that's a good segue into add detail with more descriptive words. So instead of saying write, scribble, or, you know, walk, amble. I've never used that word, but, you know, it is a choice. Yell versus maybe you're bellowing, you know, it evokes different feelings. It takes you down a different path. So Melanie gave you the example of what that can do by sharing, the stuffing feelings, or that very descriptive paragraph to say the same thing in a different way. Just evokes more feelings. Definitely.
Yeah, use words that are a little uncommon. The other day, Christy Barrett, the author that you had on the other day, for our listeners that aren't familiar with who she is by name, but Christy and I, we were chatting in person the other day, and I said to her, I was telling her a story, and I was like, I guffawed, and she was like, I've never heard anybody say that word aloud. She's like, I've read it before, but I've never heard anybody use it in conversation. I was like, well, I didn't laugh. It was like a burst of laughter. I guffawed. You know, I was like, that's the only appropriate description of what happened. And so that, use words that are precise.
Right, right. I would also say, you have to remember when you use words, and this also came up during our little retreat this weekend, right?
Mhm.
So one of the girls said, "Oh my gosh, this tastes bitter." And 5 other girls around the room were like, "Well, it was actually a sweet treat." So we're all like, "Bitter? Why is she coming up with bitter? This to me, when I think of the word bitter, that was not what we were eating. To
Right. You
me,
think unpleasant.
it was, well, it wasn't even, it was tangy. Tangy is a little bit different than bitter to me, or I don't even know
It
if
was
tangy was the right word, because it was.
So we were talking about the tea that I
No.
made, and she was talking
Oh,
about the tannins in the tea
oh
that are
yes,
kind
that was
of
another
bitter.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I understood what she meant because I've got like, I cook a lot and I have like that very specific sense of taste. And I was like, I know what you mean. I know the bitter flavor that you're talking about, but everybody else is like, this is a sweet thing overall. It's sweet. But yeah,
Well, this was carried on. I don't know if you were in the room, but this was for that dip, that lemony sweet, desserty dip with the crackers. That was also bitter. We're like, no.
And she
I'm a
probably
sweet
thought the lemon
eater.
rind. Yeah.
My weakness is sugar. I love desserts. I will eat dessert over dinner any day. I'm working on that. That's a whole nother issue. But we're eating this on a cracker, and I'm like, no, I don't get, bitter. No, not
It was
for me.
painting the wrong picture, is what you're
Well,
saying.
exactly, and that's where I was going. It was definitely painting the wrong picture in my mind. So you have to think about that when you're writing. If you just say it's bitter, and then you don't provide any, as Melanie said, any kind of description, just to get the reader to understand how you're trying to describe something, they're going to form their own opinion, and it may end up being the wrong one, and it may sabotage your book, because it could, bitter is just one word, obviously, but it could be a bigger word that is key to your book, and it could derail it. And then there you go. Now you got a bad review because someone didn't like your book. They didn't get it. Yeah. So try to avoid those kinds of things, and words matter. Melanie and I are both strategic communication specialists by degree and job, former positions and stuff like that. So words matter.
Yes,
They
word choice
matter.
is huge for us.
Yes. She, again, is much better at it from the author side than I am, but technical side is where I guess shine in that kind of stuff. But words matter. I had an example yesterday. Oh, here's an example of words matter. So I'm in this Facebook group, and it's women entrepreneurs, and gosh, there's like 500,000 women in this thing, and it's great because it's international. So you get people from the United States, but all over the world, and it's amazing. And there was one woman on there who was she was a photographer, and she was trying to come up with names for her photography business. And so she went on to describe it. I shoot families, couples, kids, blah, 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 blah. And my mind immediately goes, you shoot? That was not a word choice. That is not a word choice I would use when then I go on to say, families, couples, I'm like, shoot might not be a good word.
Capture.
Exactly. And then I remember another time when I was working for the military, and we were working on this brief that was actually going to go up to the congressional level. And one of the guys said, well, this bullet should say, I execute, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, we don't execute anybody.
Right.
No, the word execute cannot go here. Now, in that context, the guy was trying to say, we execute the plan, but because it was a bullet point, even to say we execute it, no, we don't do that. So words matter. All right, moving on. So let me make sure I captured everything I wanted to capture. Yes. So Melanie brought up Grammarly. And for those of you who watched last week's episode where I shared all of the different tools, you would have already seen this. So my apologies to you who've already watched it. But it's so important that you recognize there are tools out there to help you, because I've had so many authors come to me and say, I can't write a book. I am terrible at grammar. It's not my gifting, you know, and I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. There's tools available to help you. I told you I have a PhD and I write well, but I don't catch a lot of stuff. So I use tools like Grammarly to help me catch those things. I fix my manuscript with all of the little tips and tricks that I do, and then I send it to Melanie to catch the others. So I felt it important to show the little clip again for those who didn't get to see it last time. There's also another tool called Pro Writing Aid that I mentioned. I have not used it, so I can't really speak to it, although from the little bit that I reviewed, it looks to be very similar, and I know a lot of prominent authors use it, so check that out too. I have no affiliations to either one, so no skin in the game for me, but just, again, check out tools that are available. So let me bring this clip up. See if I do this right. Here we go. Share audio. All right.
Yeah, Grammarly is very helpful, but it's like I said, it is formulaic and it does not take the place of a real human that can recognize nuances in writing.
Yes, yes. It's a great tool for the while you're working your rough draft.
And it can save you a lot of money so that you don't have to pay a professional editor to catch the little tiny mistakes that Grammarly can catch. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It'll save you money in that aspect for sure.
Yes, because we're talking about self-publishing and not, you know, when you first start off, there's not, you don't have this big bank of money, right?
Right.
So yes, it does save, but again, you know, I'll keep hitting the drum, you know, that I really feel another set of eyes is important. If you don't have the funds to hire that professional editor, I find that it's very reasonable. You can, you know, find someone you trust that you know is good at, you know, editing things. We all have that friend, right? Who I joke, that's the grammar Nazi. She's going to catch if I post that post. And it's not actually Melanie. We have other friends that I swear, every time I post something on Facebook, somebody says, Janine, you know, so I'm like, dang it, I missed it again. I got to go in and edit, but you know, hey. Anyway.
We're all human.
Right. So I'll tell you another thing that I use, another tool that I use is the read aloud feature. Sometimes you can catch a lot of things by just turning on the read aloud feature. Did you guys know that existed? You know, have you tried that?
Actually.
Okay, so read aloud, and I'm going to bring it up so you guys can see it, is in Word. You don't even have to purchase anything else. It's right in there, and it's also in Adobe PDF. So I'm going to show you my book, Broken to Beautiful, and you'll listen to how I call him the weird guy, you know, very monotone, talks on Word, but then you open it up to the same text to PDF and there read aloud, and it's like I can change the voices. I feel like I have, you know, a lot of different options. It's pretty cool. So let me put it on the screen so you know. Again, it's called the read aloud, and it really says read aloud. Okay, so let me bring up my screen so I can share that. So let's start with, we'll go to the Word one first. Okay, so this is the Word version, and I'm gonna place my cursor where I want it, and see on the navigation bar here, usually you start with the default, right? You're on the Word page, and up at the top, there's the navigation bar. You got home, insert, draw, yada, yada, right? Well, we want to go to review, and under review is read aloud. See, here it's this big thing, and it's read aloud speech. So if I click that.
And right after you did, complete and utter panic set in. Well, that's what happened to me at the beginning of this year. All I could think was, why on earth did I agree to do it? One Sunday, as I was volunteering in the children's wing at church, a friend stopped by to tell me she passed my name along as a potential speaker for a ladies' retreat. She was invited to speak at her.
So my point is, you have this feature and you'll catch things because it'll sound strange.
That's cool. I'll have to use that one. I didn't know that existed.
Okay, now I'm going to show you. So that was I call it the weird monotone guy. So after listening to him for a while, it's like Mr. Robotics, you know.
What I'm going to use that for? Because there's a bunch of news articles that I want to read, but I won't sit there and like stare at it. But I love audiobooks.
Yes.
I'll just copy and paste the text into Word and then hit that and just listen.
Yes. So now here I'm going to share. Now here's the same text. It's in a PDF because that was what I showed you was the Word version before I actually formatted it for the book. This is after formatting, but it's the same exact text in Adobe PDF. So now listen to this awesome voice. Just amazing. So go back and find that one. So here we go. Okay, so now when you open up your PDF, it's actually right on the screen, on the main screen, and see, same text, read aloud. Oh, let me hit it again. Okay.
You ever agreed to do something, and right after you did, complete and utter panic set in? Well, that's what happened to me at the beginning of this year. All I could think was, why on earth did I agree to do it?
See what I mean? And you get voice options, so I can change the speed. I can change, who's kind of speaking. Right now, this is area online natural English. I don't know. You can add more voices, apparently. I have not done that because I'm fine with her, but
that's cool.
Trying to get myself back. Okay. So yeah, it's just a cool little tool, that you can use that comes in. I know Word and Adobe PDF. It could be a feature in others. I just haven't tried them. I haven't tried Google Docs or some other Apple-based product. So look for that. It's called Read Aloud. I imagine it would be Read Aloud because that's what it's doing, reading aloud for you. But yes, I love it. And I wish I would have found that feature when I wrote my first 2 Christian books, because I would have caught some flow errors that I have now caught a year and a half later. The text is right, but when you're trying to create a book trailer or whatever, you kind of want something that has more of a flow to it. And I think because they were my first 2 books, had more of a technical. I had too much technical still in there.
Yeah.
So it helps me with my voice as well a little bit, I think. But anyway, so 2 other tools. Okay, so once you do all of that stuff, then I say go ahead and pack up your manuscript and send it to that editor. And then working with an editor, there's tools you can use. So Melanie and I use Word, for different things, and especially the track changes tool within Words. Words. Anyway, so let me bring up, in case you've never heard of that, I'm also a university professor, and I teach a doctoral class. And this week, my students have to do a plagiarism exercise, because when you get to that level, and you're working towards that being a scholarly expert, it's critical, one, that you don't plagiarize. You could ruin your entire career, not just get, a 0 on a paper. It's critical. So anyway, they're going through this exercise, and this this woman said, I have never used track changes, which is a requirement of the assignment. Anyway, so I found this. Did you have something you wanted to add, Melanie?
I was just going to say regarding plagiarism, Grammarly now has a little plagiarism button where, and it showed it in that video just like really quickly, but it's easy to miss. They actually have a button where you can click and it'll search billions of websites and it'll show you how much you have in common with other websites. So I actually clicked on it today just to see what it would show in my blog article. And I matched 1% with a UFC news article because we both use the phrase, now I hope you can see, or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was it'll give you the option of actually referencing that. So it'll copy that news article,
Yes.
all the information, it'll copy that into your clipboard and you can paste it and reference it if you need to.
Yes. Now that you mentioned that, I do recall that feature. I haven't really used it. I see it, but I kind of just click off of it because I do use some other things as a professor. I have access to a couple other things that I use as a double check myself. But anyway, no, good point. Good point. I think that is actually a newer feature though with Grammarly.
Yeah.
Probably within the last years when I started seeing that pop up. I could be wrong. Maybe it's just more prominent now. I don't know, but good point. Good point. So let me bring up that video clip on how to actually use the track changes in Word. So I found this when I was trying to help my student yesterday. So let me bring that up. I'm going to share audio. There we go. I think this is the right one.
If you want to show edits made in a document, turn on Track Changes. Select Review, Track Changes, and Word captures any edits you make. To turn off Track Changes, select Track Changes. Word stops making new edits, and any made stay in the document. You can always see markups that someone makes. Select Display for Review and select the option you want. Simple Markup points out where changes are with a red line in the margin. All Markup shows all edits with different colors of text and lines. No Markup hides markup to show what the incorporated changes will look like. And Original shows the document in its original form. And in the Show Markup list, you can select the type of revisions you'd like to see, such as comments, insertions and deletions, formatting, balloons, and specific people.
So I love that tool because it's, when Melanie and I go back and forth, yes, she is the professional editor. But again, remember when I said, I don't want my voice changed as an author. And sometimes, even in our case, she's, made a change and I'm like, but the reason I did that, I have this particular reason in my head and I want to change it. So as long as I see that it's not a grammar error, it's grammatically correct, it still fits with the theme of the chapter or overall book or whatever, I may reject that.
Yeah, it could just be a difference of style preference.
Right. It's not that either one of us are wrong, but as the artist, as the creative, I still have final say. You still have final say because this is your book as the author,
And your name is going on it, right? So you want to make sure it's your work,
Exactly. So you still have that freedom and that control. You don't lose that with a professional editor. They just help make you better. That's all that is. And sometimes you can say, no, I don't agree with that edit. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it, and that's okay. That's okay. Melanie and I've had conversations about some different changes she recommended that I was like, well, does it really change this, that, or the other, or is it really necessary? Because here's my thought. And after hearing where I was going with it, she said, leave something, but then she added something else to make it clearer or, so it's great to have that tool because we can go back and see, well, I took that out. So when she looks at it again, she'll see her note to take it out and that I didn't, but I can put a comment as to why. And this way we don't scramble to go back and forth trying to figure out, is this the last version? Did you make that edit? I thought you said this, or, it kind of eliminates some of that extra confusion that you don't need when working with each other. And I just like it to, for tracking purposes. So I know what's changing within the manuscript.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I had on my end. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Melanie, since you are that professional editor?
Just check out the blog article that's going up later today. What does a book editor do? And that'll tell you everything. And I actually focused less on the grammatical errors because I think, oftentimes you assume that's what an editor does. But I talk about content suggestions, going beyond simple grammatical mistakes, adding and subtracting things from the book to, contribute to clarity, painting a complete picture with your book, and directional advice. So I talk about some of those things that, people that are new authors might not really know what to expect when working with an editor. So check that out. And that's all I have.
Great. I hope you enjoyed this. If you missed the beginning of the episode, feel free to hit that replay. And we had a good time today. We shared some good stuff. As Melanie said, she'll get that article posted today. You can grab that off the website, visiontopurpose.com. And so I think.
And we do offer editing services. If you go to visiontopurpose.com and click on the writing services tab, you can see all the writing services that we offer. And I am available for hire for editing through Vision to Purpose. So, and Janine also does developmental stuff with the authors as well. So check out the writing services tab under our website, visiontopurpose.com.
Yes, she's so good. She's so good. So what can you expect for next month? Can you believe March is already gone? I mean, gosh, this is our last podcast for March. So in April, we're going to switch gears a little bit because, this podcast is not just for authors. It's also for job seekers, business professionals, etc. So next month, we're kind of going to focus on the job seekers a little bit. So I'm going to bring on some experts in the field. So resume writers, LinkedIn strategists, HR professionals and recruiters, that kind of stuff. So the month of April is going to be focused on career stuff. And then fast forward to May, and we'll be back on the author stuff. We're going to bring in some military authors, those transitioning members who are now veterans or on their way to becoming veterans. They're kind of processing out now, have written books too. We have several of them. We have an Army Ranger. We have a retired Air Force member, and several others. So May will be dedicated to our military members who have gone on to write books too, and amazing books. So that's all I have for today. Catch us next Thursday, same time, same channel. And thanks, friends. We'll see you later.